I don't really have anything in mind until it pops in there now. And then when I do get a concept in my mind, I will sit down and try to sketch it to the best of my ability. And then what really starts to happen for me is when I pick my material, whether it's steel or silver, then I kind of know the direction I want to go with it, and as the piece starts to evolve, so does the idea for it. I had a pattern in mind, and I took a rough guesstimate of where the ginkgo leaves would wind up being on the metal, and that's when I started to fuse gold in different spots where I thought there would be some leaves. And so I took a guess. Now, I could have patterned the entire sheet with gold, but I think that's a bit of a waste. So I actually like the idea of having a mottled look of gold and steel. I think this next pass I'll probably be able to set it in. Press it down with the knife so this will go over the empty seating in there. And some trouble getting it seated. You know how important it is to have that overlapping the edge. So you have to go from a flat drawing and visualize the different layers, depths, levels that you're going to take this to make it look three-dimensional, to become three-dimensional. So what's going to be in the foreground, what's going to be in the background. And it's easier if you look at something in real life, but you have to have that concept so that as you start to work on the piece, for example, some of these smaller leaves are going to be in the background. So I'm not going to do the repoussé as deep. It's just going to be a very subtle layer, a subtle depression in the tar. And that kind of gives me a nice starting point, because then I can look at that first level and go, all right, the next one I'm going to go to is probably at a level 2 or 3. And so I'm going to start out, make it the same level as the background leaf, and then go back over it and work it a little deeper and see if I'm happy with that depression. Has it gone deep enough that it's going to come out and stand out in front of that background leaf? So now I'm looking at like level 1 and level 2. And then eventually I'll get to level 3. This piece doesn't have that many levels to it. The outline is done to reinforce the level that you've achieved. And so it emphasizes that depth. Plus it gives a ridge, a metal ridge, kind of like a corner or an edge, so that you can see the distinction between the different leaves. I'm having a hard time seeing right now because the light's just not. When you get ready to take it out of the pitch for the first time, you have to heat it up so that it is loose, and you grab it with a pair of pliers and just start working it, lifting it out as you can see the pitch is getting more liquid and is willing to let go of it. Once you get it completely out of the metal, then you're going to have some residual of the black tar pitch on it, because that tends to be stickier than the red, and that you just end up burning that off. It becomes ash. And when you get done removing it from the tar, you flip it so that you are now seeing the right side of it.
Trying to melt some of it back down into here.
When you start working on this side of the flip, one of the first things you're going to do is you're going to put it on the wood. This is a plywood dual purpose work surface here. The tar's on one side and the plywood is on the other side. The wood is soft enough but also firm enough to allow you to go back over your outlines on the wood so that you're reinforcing to make sure that they are standing out the way you want them to stand out in the piece. Once again, you have to heat your tar up so that it'll accept the metal again, but in the process of doing that, you also need to fill up the depression areas of your metal with the pitch, so that you're sure that you've got all of those filled and there's no air pockets. You let that set aside. You continue to work on your pitch so it becomes liquidy enough to accept the metal again. This also gives the pitch that you put into your depressions time to cool and set a little bit inside of those and settle. And then, once again, you turn the four corners so it's got teeth to dig into the pitch. You turn it over and you make sure it's all adhered in the tar again, that it's been accepted. And so now you've got the softness of the tar up in those depressed areas so that they'll be acting as a cushion for your hammer hammer and chisel as you're working on creating texture or lines or some reverse depressions to give it the look that you want for what you're working on. When it's in the pitch, like at this point, this is the third part of the process, then you're really working on getting the textures right, making sure that it looks like what you're going for conceptually, at least for what I've done right now. It's you want to, it's your finishing work, it's your finishing part of the piece. So this is my line for going back over with my curve tools, like these outliners. So this has a very soft curve to it, and I have 4 different sizes depending on the sharpness of the curve versus a long stretch. Like this is good for relatively long even almost a straight line. So what I do is I outline each one of the leaves so that I know where my outline needs to go with the tool. This adds more definition to what you've raised up when you were working on the back side of it. So now it's out of the tar, all of the texture and formation to make it look like folding leaves has been applied. And now I'm going to go around and clean up the entire area around the leaves. I'm going to flatten it in the process. That will apply some texture. Depending on how that texture looks, I may go ahead and apply an additional texture to it. But it's the smoothing and leveling of all the base metal that the leaves are sitting above. What you do next is you now use the wire that's going to be the support structure for the cuff, and you form that around the areas that you want to outline. And you do this on the back side of the piece. Once you get the wire shaped, then you have to clamp that down to the piece, because mine are so freeform. They're not a perfect square, they're not a perfect rectangle. I've got lots of curves and shapes and twists and flows to it. So it's not the easiest thing to solder down on the back side of the piece.